الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Brothers and sisters in Islam, we in America face a very troubling future with regard to what is perhaps for us the most precious dimension of our lives. And I refer here to the growing crisis in faith that many of our young Muslim brothers and sisters grapple with because of the challenges that this country, this culture, this modern age poses. The solutions to this, the answers to this are not easy to come by. And it is a consequence of a transition that all of us undertake. Some of us are migrants who've moved from some Muslim country, or perhaps even a non-Muslim country, and in doing so we had to undergo and adapt to the changed circumstances in which we found ourselves. The same applies to our children, except for the fact that the transition that they undertake is not necessarily a geographical transition. They're not moving from space to space. They're moving from ideas to ideas. But in both cases, the territory into which we have moved and they're moving is for the most part uncharted. We don't know what to do when we get there. And therefore, we are ill-equipped to handle these situations. The best we can do is provide some kind of temporary relief, a band-aid solution, which works to some extent, but often does not. When we undertake this transition, some of us have moved from India, some from Indonesia, some from Nigeria, some from Egypt to the West. Then we either isolate ourselves, we integrate into American society, or we assimilate. These are the three major patterns of transition that take place whenever we move from one culture to another, from one territory to another. When you isolate yourself, and you will find pockets of Muslims isolating themselves in the city of Detroit, in Chicago, all over the place. It's one mechanism. It's a tool we use to protect our faith and culture from the enormous challenges that America poses. Every choice that we make, whether it is of isolation, integration, or assimilation, comes at a cost. They all have costs. We know about these things retrospectively, after the fact. We've been in this country, for some of us, for centuries, and some of us for decades. We were forcibly brought to this country in chains. And notwithstanding those arduous circumstances, some of us were able to maintain our faith. And we left in small, meager proportions. We left an indelible impression upon early American society. But for the most part, those who were forcibly brought to this country were forced to assimilate, were forced to leave their names, their dietary habits, their language, and of course, most painfully for them, their religion, in order to survive in this country. Our ancestors brought here in slave ships from Africa were forced to undertake this grotesque and painful transition. We are not forced to do so. At least it's not as forcible. It is more seductive. It's the trade-off for being accepted and for advancing in this country. Those who isolate themselves from American society thrive in terms of their culture, thrive in terms of their eating habits, thrive in terms of maintaining their faith. But slowly but surely, greater society, almost like a kind of osmosis, it penetrates. It penetrates and it corrodes. And if we don't have the tools to handle that kind of incursion, then we collapse quite easily. Because we built these walls around us, and from the inside the wall looks solid. From the outside it's like a speck of dust. It collapses very easily. Those who integrate try to have the best of both worlds. And with that comes both the good of both worlds as well as the bad of both worlds. Our concern for today, and it should be a concern for Muslims all over the country, and when I speak to my colleagues elsewhere, we are at least aware of the challenge we face in this assimilationist society. We are aware of it. We look at our Jewish brothers and we see them facing a similar challenge. They too have broken up into different categories. Amongst them you find the Orthodox, amongst them you find the Reconstructionists, amongst them you find the conservative. And these are all groupings that have responded to the challenges of America, to their culture and their faith. We don't quite have the categories yet, or we don't have names for these categories. But we too are facing similar challenges. They have assimilated to a large extent and have now become painfully aware of the consequences of that assimilation. So they build walls. So if you are a Jewish person wanting to marry a Christian woman, then many rabbis will not perform the marriage, because they understand that marriage is the corridor to a multi-ethnic, multi-religious, non-conformative society, which is great for society, by the way. This is the challenge you face. It is good for society because people do put away their badges that otherwise build walls around them, and they work together to live more harmoniously together. But it's not good for culture and religion. It slowly whittles away religion and culture. So Jews try and do that. We have communes, actually. We have one on the way from here to Chicago, and it made the New York Times a few months ago. It's a fascinating community of African American Muslims who were asked by their sheikh, this is a Sufi tariqah, they were asked by their sheikh to move away from society so that they could preserve not just their faith, because in the case of the African American community, they are also challenged by the debilitating behavior of people in their communities. So he asked them to move over there, and they established a community. And the community functions very well. So if any one of you is depressed enough to choose to do so, we can find you the address and you're more than welcome to join them. We might come by and visit you occasionally. But generally, we're not inclined to do that. We'd like to be integrationists, and we hope to God that we do not assimilate. But here's what happens. The more progressive you are, the more likely you are to be assimilated. The more advanced you are, the more likely you are to be assimilated. The better your grades, the more likely you are to be assimilated. The nicer the university that you go to, the more likely you are to be assimilated. That is the challenge we face. And it is this very impulse, that brought us from Hyderabad to America, that brought us from Cairo to America, that brought us from Saudi Arabia to America. The urge to grow, the urge to progress, the urge to develop, and all of these things are good. They're all very good, but they have a disclaimer. And it is this disclaimer that we face today. How do we maintain faith? How do we maintain our religiosity? How do we maintain our culture in a society that asks nothing else of us? It opens its arms to us on condition that faith is not a hurdle. It is not an impediment. Do away with your faith and you are more than likely to thrive. And we've had tremendous success in some regards. About 30 years ago in this very community, in this very masjid, a small group of people decided to become politically active. And that bore fruit. You can draw a direct line connecting Rashida to that earlier effort when we engaged people like David Banya and so on. It was a long time ago. But if not for those baby steps 40 years ago, you would not have 4 Congress people sitting in government. And we have thousands of people who now occupy high positions in all 3 branches of government. That is part of our desire, our urge to belong to the United States, to become integral to the United States, to contribute to the United States. So politically we have made strides. We have made strides in the entertainment industry. We have DJ Khalid, who has done very well for himself and given the Palestinians a name in American, in the music scene. And we have people who, we have someone, I forget his name right now, who was invited to provide the comedy act for the White House press cop. I'm looking at your faces and you know what I'm talking about. You've got that knowing smile. Those are achievements. They're not easy to come by. We have women who have conquered the, what's that thing called? That strip that they walk on, strip naked. And they make exceptions to their behavior in the month of Ramadan. They actually throw a few Ramadan parties to remind people that they too belong to the Muslim faith. That they too have an ancestry that takes them either to Pakistan or it takes them, in the case of these 2 ladies, to Syria. We have been successful enough to have our names etched in the history of the American presidential system. America will always remember Hussein. America will always remember Hussein, for the good or for the bad. America will always remember Steve Jobs. If anyone knows his history, they know that he too has a Muslim connection. So what do we do with these people? What do we do with such accomplishments? What do we do with such achievements? That is part of the challenge we face as Muslims. What do we do with our children? Because I'm talking about our children. I'm not talking about people out there. We are that community who made that transition first from Algeria to New York, and then from the homes in which the Quran was recited to the best universities in this world. And slowly we have Not everyone makes a dramatic transition. Some do, but most don't. So you have this lady from Somalia who gets on a plane, and then on her way she gets to Europe, and then in Europe she keeps going, ends up in the United States and becomes a vocal, angry enemy of Islam. But not everyone is that way. Not everyone takes that kind of stand, who protests against Islam's alleged discrimination against women by inviting an artist to inscribe the words of the Holy Quran on her naked body. That's all part of our transition. She too is one of us. She too is one of us. For the most part, it's a gradual process. And you get up one day and you realize, whoa, I don't even know if I belong any longer. I don't even know if I belong any longer. So this then is that long, strange path from being Muslim entirely to being Muslim partly to being Muslim not at all. This is the challenge we face. In Detroit, in New York, and in other parts of the world. The Muslim world is not immune from this. They too face this challenge, but not quite as dramatic and harsh as do we here in this country. We ought to pool our resources and focus on that which is important. It is important that we provide the tools that will help our kids become productive Americans and equally so productive Muslims. Or perhaps the order should be reversed. Productive Muslims and equally so productive Americans. And when everything is said and done, we ought to remember Nuh alayhi salam. Nuh alayhi salam. For he suffered this same tragedy in the most dramatic way. When the Quran responds to his plea, and he says, Allah speaking directly to Nuh, and he says, إِنَّهُ لَيْسَ مِنْ أَهْلِكَ إِنَّهُ عَمَلٌ غَيْرُ صَالِحٍ. Nuh, the messenger of Allah, this son of yours that you once saved from the waters that will soon drown him, he is not one of you. In other words, not biologically. That's not what Allah is saying. Theologically, he is not one of you. So this can certainly happen in the best of homes. But we have the responsibility, the obligation to work as ardently as we did to bring that kid into Harvard, Princeton, or Yale, to give him that, at least that kind of attention, so that we can protect him from the dangers of society. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله حمدا كثيرا كما أمر، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله إرغاما لمن جحد به وكفر، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله سيد الخلائق والبشر. عباد الله اتقوا الله تعالى من سماع اللغو وفضول الخبر، وانتهوا عما نهاكم عنه وزجر، واعلموا أن الله أمركم بأمر بدأ فيه بنفسه وثلث بكم من برية جنه وإنسه، فقال تعالى إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد، وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد، خصوصا منهم ذي الأصل العريق أبي بكر وعمر وعثمان وعلي، وعلى بقية الصحابة والقرابة أجمعين. اللهم اعز الاسلام والمسلمين. اللهم اعز الاسلام والمسلمين. اللهم اعز الاسلام والمسلمين. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. عباد الله اتقوا الله، إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون. أقم الصلاة.